It's safe to say a lot of us out there love the Guardians of the Galaxy, myself included, and we've got quite a bunch of the heroes in the game. And with Groot and Star-Lord and some of the heroes being pretty strong in the game, we are still missing 3 of the main Guardians of the Galaxy characters, and we're going to go through them in this video and explain how their kit should actually work, because we do need to complete the full Guardians of the Galaxy inside Marvel Rivals. So first up is, where's Gamora and why is Gamora? Because she's not inside Marvel Rivals, I'll tell you that much. And when it comes to her kit, I definitely think she should be a duelist. There's kind of no other way to put Gamora in the game other than being a duelist. She's basically a Godslayer alongside Thanos for the majority of basically her career until she turns into a Guardian, obviously. But like I said, when it comes to the kit, the primary fire should either be her Godslayer sword, which obviously was gifted to her by Thanos, or it should be the energy rifle. Now, she could have 2 fire modes, obviously, which I think she should have anyway. Now, the pulse rifle fire should be a burst rifle kind of thing, where it kind of can fire a couple of shots down range in a burst, but it's also hit scan. Think about Luna Snow's attack, but obviously coming from a weapon instead. Now, when it comes to the Godslayer sword, now this is where most of her kit and most of the extra abilities that she gains will be from. So this is going to be her secondary fire, which is super important, almost kind of like Blade in a way, but slightly different, right? Now, when it comes to her overall kit idea, I think it should be a lot movement based. She should kind of be a dive style of hero, because she does do a lot of like somersaults and things like that inside the comics, the cartoons, and even inside the movies as well. So her first evasive ability, kind of almost like Star-Lord's shift, is that she can somersault, right? She's got 2 somersaults that she can use to escape certain situations, and I think that'd be super cool to have in the game. Now, either that, or she can have maybe like a roll where she can kind of dive and roll at the same time. Either or would work really well. But then when it comes to her passive, the passive is probably the best, because she's going to have 2, right? Any enemy she kills with the Godslayer sword, so let's say she kills an enemy with the Godslayer sword, the follow-up enemy after that will get a healing reduction. So essentially she's going to hit them with a healing reduction, kind of similar to what Blade can do, obviously, but she can only do it when she's killed an enemy, and then the follow-up enemy allows that healing reduction. But it means she can chain kills essentially a bit better than some of the other duelists in the game, because every time she gets a kill, she's more likely to get another kill. Now, when it comes to her other passive, to not make everything completely broken, she should have the ability to wall bounce, and that'll be only one time where she can jump off a wall if she's near it, and that way she can use the sword strike, right? And this is a passive, by the way, so it's always on. You could always wall bounce, but you can only do it once. I think that'd be a really cool way of adding some extra maneuverability to this hero. Now, when it comes to overall movement, I think she should be able to kind of grant herself movement boost, almost kind of similar to Mantis, right? Where just the overall movement is just a little bit quicker than some of the other heroes in the game, and I think that'd be a really cool way to make her really fast, deadly, and allow her to chain those kills like I mentioned. Now, when it comes to her ultimate, I've not really got too much of a great idea for this, but maybe something like a really strong sword strike, or maybe she can throw enemies up into the air and then kind of sword strike them at the same time. I'm not really too sure. Obviously, it will need to be around the Godslayer, because that is her strongest weapon that she has. Next up, we have Nebula. Now, when it comes to Nebula, I think she's got the best base design to actually be a strategist inside Marvel Rivals. And not in the natural sense of a strategist, because I feel like they could take the strategist role in a completely different way, especially with Nebula. And that's just because obviously she's not really going to be a healing style of character, but then again, neither is Ultron. So they could give her some slight healing, but I don't think this should be her main part of her kit. The main part of her kit is to incapacitate the enemy team. But when it comes to her primary attack, I think she should be able to have maybe some kind of melee sword swings. That would be just kind of for her actual just melee, the standard melee that we get. And then she should have some kind of plasma rifle, right? The plasma rifle could be to keep her at range, because I don't think she should be super close range, especially with the kind of kit that we're going to design here. She should be trying to support her team the best possible. Now, when it comes to her abilities, the main one she should have is her sabotage ability. Now, this allows her to mark enemy, so whether it's a DPS, a strategist, or a vanguard, and it can shut down their abilities. Now, either it can shut down their cooldown abilities, or it can shut down their damage. So for example, for a second or maybe a second and a half, the enemy DPS that she's selected cannot deal any damage whatsoever. And then it would be similar for a strategist. So if she marks an enemy strategist, the enemy strategist for a second and a half cannot deal any healing whatsoever, right? And this is super strong. If she has this ability, I think this would be absolutely insane, and it adds a different dynamic to the game where having a Nebula on the team can definitely help you kind of get past those fights or kind of shut down some of the better players in the enemy team, right? Like I said, if that's kind of broken, then she could basically just take away one of the cooldowns for a second or two. Her next ability should be some kind of shock ability where she's able to use her arm and shock the enemy team, and that will stun them for a couple of seconds or even necessarily slow them down. One or the other, it doesn't really matter, but slowing down the enemy team so they can't really move around too much. Stun multiple enemies, unlike what the Hulk can do. Nebula can actually stun multiple enemies at once, and that's maybe within a small radius of 5 meters or 10 meters or something like that. For the last of Nebula's abilities, we've got one more standard ability, which is her damage buff. Now, her damage buff is very different to the other heroes in the game already. So Mantis and Gambit provide damage buffs, so does Rocket as well, by the way. But theirs are all percentage based, right? But I think the Nebula damage buff should be based on critical hits only. So essentially, every shot that your teammates land when you have this ability active, and the teammates that are near you, as well as Nebula herself, are able to deal 100% critical hit damage to every part of the body, and that just means that she's able to output a little bit more damage buff than some of the other heroes in this game, but it's not completely broken, right? So you're still needing to land a couple of shots because no one can really one shot to the head in this game besides Hawkeye. And when it comes to her ultimate ability, basically she links with her teammates. She could use her bionic arm or whatever it may be, and she absorbs some damage that they're taking in, and then she could use her laser eye to basically point it back at the enemy team and fire it back. I think that would be a really cool way of not only being a kind of defensive ult, but also being an offensive ult as well, kind of similar to Magneto's ultimate, but it could work slightly differently, that she's only able to absorb a certain amount of damage or something like that. But I think that would be a crazy ultimate that Nebula could have to then basically help keep her teammates alive to some extent, but then also fire back the damage to the enemy team as well. Last and but not least, we have Drax, and Drax is the one that I'm looking forward to the absolute most. Hopefully they add him into Marvel Rivals, because I think they could design this character in such a cool way, and hopefully they do him justice, because I love Drax, man. And when it comes to his primary attack, I think he should only have one attack, and that is obviously his blade slashes, so that's the Catanthian blades. And he should be able to deal damage with them and deal a decent amount of damage at that. Now, obviously, he's going to be a Vanguard, so he should be able to output a solid amount of damage, and also he's got some tanky HP to back that up as well. Now, when it comes to his passive ability, I actually have a couple of ideas for this. So, essentially, whilst he's got his passive ability active, and this kind of happens all the time, when he's at full HP, he's kind of taking a reduced amount of damage, right? Until he takes a decent amount of hits, that he starts taking full damage. But the more damage he tanks, essentially, his sword strikes or his blade strikes go faster. And I think that just allows him to output a bit more damage. And obviously, because he is a Vanguard, he can tank a bit more damage. So this kind of, as a passive, will allow him to be a bit more of a brawler, which is exactly what Drax is. Now, his other ability, he's going to have an explosive entrance, so he's able to jump in to any kind of part of the map, almost like Hulk to an extent, but you can't do it all the time. It's one of his abilities, and he basically slams down on the ground and it stuns the enemies in place. Now, I do think Drax should have more melee-based attack abilities, but I was playing with two different ideas here. So the first one is the knife throw. So essentially, he can throw one of his knives at the enemy player. If he lands the attack, then he can dash towards them and then get the faster melee strikes. So he doesn't need to take the damage, but it will stack with the passive and give him even faster melee strikes, which I think would be really, really strong, and that'd be pretty decent. And if he misses the dash, then you can basically dash towards wherever the knife is landed, essentially. I think that'd be pretty cool, so that is not a complete wasted ability if he doesn't land it. Or he can either skewer the enemy, right? So he can basically dash forward and skewer them against the wall or something, and then if he hits them against the wall, then he's able to deal faster melee strikes once again. Kind of similar to what Emma Frost can do when she kicks an enemy off a wall and that deals a bit more damage, but essentially he kind of pins them to the wall, and then you'll be dealing damage to them whilst they're kind of stunned in place for a quick moment. So I do think he should have a pretty solid amount of HP just to allow him to be that brawling hero. And maybe they could give him some overshield to some extent, but I don't really necessarily think he needs it. And then when it comes to his ultimate, I'm really not too sure what they can do, but I'm thinking more of something along the lines of like Kratos with his chained swords inside God of War, and essentially can just deal tons of slashing damage to the enemy. I think that is what I think Drax should be able to do. So there we have it. Those are the 3 main Guardians of the Galaxy characters with my kit design for each one of them. But if you enjoyed this video and you want to see more like this, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, and thank you very much for watching.